On an icy, stormy evening, an intruder slips through the window of Charlie Jr.'s second-floor nursery. And just like that, the boy is gone. When Charles and Ann Lindbergh discover their son is missing, they're terrified. They call the New Jersey State Police. When detectives arrive, they find an envelope with a ransom note inside. The kidnapper wants $50,000 for the safe return of Charlie Jr. They also find muddy footprints, but there's no blood and no fingerprints. Investigators also discover a ladder with a broken rung, suggesting the kidnapper snapped it while climbing up or down. When the press catches wind of the kidnapping, it sets off an international firestorm.
Not a single bet is overlooked in the search for the most famous baby in the world.
Because Charles Lindbergh is a living legend. In 1927, Lindbergh becomes the first aviator to fly non-stop from New York to Paris across the Atlantic Ocean. After he lands, he becomes the most famous man on the planet. And with so much fame comes incredible fortune. Lindy becomes one of the wealthiest celebrities in the world, making the Lindbergh family a target. Stealing Charles Lindbergh's son is an audacious crime, and police have little to go on. They launch a nationwide manhunt to locate the kidnapper and return Charlie Jr. home safely. Desperate to get his son back, wealthy Lindbergh agrees to pay the $50,000 ransom for Jr.'s release. But to catch the kidnapper, the FBI marks the serial numbers on the money used for the ransom payment. The trap is set. If so much as a single bill is deposited in a bank, investigators will be able to trace it back to Charlie's kidnapper. The kidnapper receives the ransom and reveals that the boy is at Woodlawn Cemetery at Whitmore and Fremont. But when investigators arrive, there is no sign of the boy. Charles and Ann are devastated. It's a shocking setback. But detectives begin to wonder, is there more to this case than meets the eye? Months later, the kidnapping case takes a horrifying turn. Just 4 miles from the flyer's estate, Charlie Jr. is found dead in the forest. And when detectives look closely at the boy's body, there is little trace of blood, and Charlie has a hole in his skull. Even more alarming, several vital organs are missing. Investigators want to know, how did Charlie Jr. suffer such ghastly injuries? What they uncover will outrage the nation. But a fresh analysis of the autopsy report almost a century later has inspired a controversial new theory that suggests an even more twisted and macabre motive for the young boy's death. If accurate, the identity of the suspected killer is almost unthinkable. Months after the disappearance of Charles Lindbergh's young son, he turns up dead just miles from the family estate. And the condition of the boy's body is disturbing. There's a hole in his skull, which is also crushed. There is little sign of blood, and in a bizarre twist, some of his organs appear to be missing. Looking at all the evidence, detectives believe the kidnapper dropped Charlie while descending from the nursery when their wooden ladder broke, creating the hole in Jr.'s skull. Police suspect that within minutes, the child dies from the massive impact, and the abductor abandons Charlie's body in the forest. They suspect the toddler's internal injuries are caused by wild animals. When the press gets a hold of the story, outrage spreads from coast to coast. The son of America's greatest living hero dies in a grisly, brutal murder. And police still can't find Charlie's killer. It isn't until 2 years later that some of the FBI's marked bills from the ransom are spent at a gas station in New York City. Agents trace the money back to the man who buys the fuel. German carpenter Bruno Richard Hauptmann.
You are under arrest.
Looking into Hauptmann's background, detectives are surprised. They see no connection between Bruno and the Lindbergh family. However, when they search Hauptmann's old junkyard shack, they find over $14,000 in marked ransom bills. Bruno is arrested for the kidnapping and murder of Charles Lindbergh Jr. But Hauptmann asserts he's innocent. Around the world, newspapers hail Hauptmann's case the trial of the century.
He wanted that money so he could, as he did, live a life of luxury and ease so he wouldn't have to work. He quit his job the day he collected the $50,000, the very day.
During his trial, Bruno's attorney claims the case against Hauptmann is weak. Bruno testifies the money found in his garage belongs to a deceased business partner. Bruno's wife, Anna, testifies that Hauptmann was with her the night of the kidnapping. And Bruno's attorney reminds the court that none of Hauptmann's fingerprints are ever found on the ladder, the ransom note, or inside the Lindbergh nursery. But to the jury, the marked ransom bills are compelling evidence. Bruno Richard Hauptmann is found guilty of murder. And on April 3, 1936, he dies in the electric chair.
America is relieved. Justice has finally been served for the terrible murder of Charles Lindbergh's poor baby son. But many begin to wonder, did authorities execute the wrong man? In the years following Charlie's death, biographers discover Lindbergh was obsessed with his son's physical appearance. Authors contend when Charlie is born in 1930, his aviator father is unhappy with Junior's large head and deformed toes on his right foot, symptoms of the condition known as rickets. Some allege that Lindbergh, America's rugged, handsome hero, fears his own son looks like a weakling. Charles Lindbergh is also a believer in eugenics, a now discredited science based on the theory that one could use selective breeding to rid the world of genetically inferior humans. And Lindbergh was known to have a close relationship with the nefarious godfather of eugenics, Alexis Carrel. This leads a group of academics to come up with a new theory for Charlie's disappearance. In 2020, forensic pathologist Dr. Peter Speth conducts new analysis on the forensic evidence from the murder, and what he finds is disturbing.
When I looked at the autopsy report, there was something that caught my attention. The body, when it was found, was in a state of advanced decay, and the organs were gone. But what struck me was the face. The forehead was so well preserved, and the skin on the right foot was white, and yet the legs were skeletonized. How did that happen? How was it possible to preserve the face and the right foot? It suggests chemicals. So I began to research, what do taxidermists use to preserve the hide? They use what is called tannic acid, or tannin. Now I became interested in who had knowledge of tannic acid, and I hit pay dirt. Alexis Carrel.
As we know, Alexis Carrel is the godfather of the sinister theory of eugenics, who Lindbergh counted as a close friend. Dr. Speth speculates that this evidence points to a harrowing possibility.
I believe that Charles Lindbergh and Alexis Carrel carried out surgical procedures to solve some of these many problems that Chas Jr. had because he's abnormal, and then failed. So they personally were involved in the killing of that child.
Many find this theory too shocking to believe. However, there's compelling evidence supporting Dr. Speth's claims.
Why then preserve the face and the right foot? Well, if the body's in advanced decay, how are you going to identify the baby? And what are the two identifying features? One, the prominent forehead, and secondly, the overlapping toes on the right foot.
Dr. Speth further speculates that Lindbergh was certain that he wanted the body of Charles Jr. recovered so that no one would come out later in life claiming they were the lost boy. There's no doubt this is a highly controversial allegation, but there's one more detail that may fuel this theory even more.
Charles Lindbergh was leading the investigation and telling the state police what they could or could not do. He had the baby cremated and put out an order that none of the evidence would ever undergo further scientific investigations. To this day, the governors, the attorney general, and state police have been upholding that.
Charles Lindbergh was a larger-than-life icon who changed the world forever, but he was also a very complex figure, living a life of contradictions. Will we ever know what really happened that stormy night in 1932?
Most Lindbergh authors, scholars, and historians dismiss this unsettling theory as too lurid to believe. My own take is that the evidence to support it is highly circumstantial. What cannot be doubted, though, is the true tragedy here: the senseless death of an innocent child.